Good morning, and welcome back to the Vitality Project. I'm Dr. Bob. Yesterday, we looked at the psychological perspective on shame, specifically how it is that shame is like a two-sided coin. And just by way of review, we talked about how one side represents our experience of any threat to our social acceptance, especially with people that matter most to us. And then the other side of the coin is a threat to our feeling okay about ourselves or self-esteem. We also engaged in an exercise where we worked at identifying in our own lives our own kind of intimate experiences of shame. And today what I'd like to do is extend that conversation by now tying the experience of shame directly into our addictive behaviors. You know, when I ask treatment center groups that I lead every day, what is the number one trigger for addictive relapse? You know what they say? They'll exclaim in response, because they've studied this with me, they'll say it's stress. Stress is the number one trigger for addictive relapse. How does this actually work? Well, I'll summarize that briefly today. The body and the brain do not like being out of balance. And you recall in previous podcasts in the last week or so, we've talked about two stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and how it is that shame kicks up stress higher than any other emotion. So if you can imagine for just a second a teeter-totter or a seesaw, with cortisol, when stress and cortisol are way up high, for example, in a state of shame, the body's out of whack and the body cannot tolerate this state of affairs. So what does it do? Well, on the other end of the teeter-totter is a brain chemical down here, more technically a neurotransmitter that's called dopamine. When dopamine is released in the brain and goes up on the teeter-totter, stress, or the stress hormones, for short, we'll just say cortisol, it goes down. So dopamine goes up, cortisol goes down. So it goes. Elevated cortisol is reduced by elevations in dopamine. Next question then is, how do we get dopamine to go up? Because the goal, after all, is to get our stress levels down, right? This is where the plot thickens, and this is exactly where addictive behaviors enter the scene. I'd love for you to come back tomorrow. What I want to discuss is more about dopamine and how our addictive behaviors are directly tied into it and in its relationship to stress. Thanks for joining me here today, and I wish you a good day.